Well, Boda represents, to me, a fellowship with people who are, first of all, very talented. Secondly, very sincere in the object that their lives represent. That is, looking after other people and their property, their lives, their welfare, and it is an organization that has so much to represent because there's so many different facets to the practice of law, and of course to trial law, which is merely part of the overall profession, but it is the most exciting, first of all of our different disciplines, and secondly, it attracts so many different types of people. You have those who are naturally aggressive and those who are naturally defensive, and all of those are melded into one organization. Whether you be a criminal lawyer or a defense civil lawyer or a plaintiff's lawyer or a prosecutor, you find a home in Boda. To me personally, now that my future is behind me, I'm now 87, soon to be 88. The time was when I was the youngest person in the courtroom, and now I'm the oldest person in the courtroom, by far. It represents to me, Boda represents to me, the opportunity to become friends with those who were once antagonists and competitors, and people whom I naturally strived against. But now that I'm in my dotage, I can be friends with these people. And recently we had a dinner celebrating the life and regretting the death of a fine lawyer, Bud Eubanks. And Bud's son is now a lawyer in the Rumberger firm, where I am of counsel as a lawyer. And Bud and I were competitors, and I told the group that the thing I regretted about his untimely death was that it was before we could put all that behind us and become friends. So now I'm able to be friendly with people that I had grievances against, and no doubt had grievances against me, in the sense of annoyances, not formal grievances, but so it represents to me a shelter, a refuge where I can be myself, not on stage, and enjoy the personalities and the wonderful people who walk the floors of our courtrooms, and enjoy them for what they are and be what I am, whatever that is. And we didn't have that before. There was the element of competition and being on guard and being on stage. So you can drop all that.
Running. And I would really like you to cover that ground again about how you said in combat, and well, you're the only one left standing.
Yeah. To me, Boda represents something personal, a refuge where I can meet with people, many of whom I've been in combat with. Some co-counsel, others opposing counsel. And in those days, one was on his guard. It was you could not relax, at least I did not, and I wasn't really myself. I was another person. I was on stage, and on guard. And with Oboda, and one of the pleasant things about Oboda is that you can be yourself, and you have no fear of anything you say or do being held against you, as it were. So to me, it represents a place where I can now that my future's behind me, I can be relaxed and enjoy the personalities and the just good times that I can have with people of like calling. And it is a calling to me, being a trial lawyer. You know, our forebears had been in a society where the accident of birth pretty much predicted the extent to which you could accomplish with your life. And we decided, we the founders of this great nation, decided that we wouldn't have an aristocracy. There was not to be a landed gentry. And out of this, everyone needs heroes, and our society needed heroes. And those heroes became the leaders of the community, the physicians, the lawyers, the teachers, the clergy. They were people who, by a dint of personal sacrifice and study, had acquired knowledge and capacity and ability that would help society at large and help people individually. And this became our aristocracy. It was a moral aristocracy, whereby by reason of these talents, others admired these people, and they didn't envy them. It wasn't a matter of jealousy. It was a matter of recognizing that they had something to offer that was for the benefit of society at large, and of course individuals. By helping, they help society. And so in my judgment, we need to recognize that the practice of law is, first of all, an art, and secondly, a calling, by which we are given a very extreme responsibility of representing other people whose life, liberty, property may be in jeopardy. And to me, I always took it seriously. I tried not to take myself seriously, but I did take my work seriously. And we all should. And we should always recognize that we have a responsibility. I'm fearful that not only has the bar, but also the medical community, the educational community, and the clergy have all suffered by a lack of moral responsibility, by the failure to recognize the deep obligation that all of us have, and to abandon, in many instances, the welfare of our clients, our parishioners, our students, and our patients in the quest to just acquire. And I think it's a very dangerous thing for any society to confront. And we need to be ever mindful of our obligation, not only to our clients and to ourselves, but to society. They say pride goeth before a fall. I try in my life not to be too prideful. I'm very thankful and very appreciative of many honors that have been heaped on me, many of them undeserved. But being in court is an honor that I've always enjoyed more than any of the other performances of my life. I testified one time as an expert witness, and when I got through, I was deposed later, and they said, what did you intend to do? And I said, I intended to have a good performance. And they said, performance in court? And I said, sure. Performance is to accomplish something. You perform or you don't perform. If you're a professional, you perform. Any decent gymnast can do a one-handed handstand, but professionals can do it every time. They may make it look hard, but they can do it every time. So the fun I've had in court has just been legion, time after time after time. I've had so much fun, and couldn't laugh at the time, but I remember one time, I must say, it was quite a performance. A judge had taken an intense dislike to me, which I could understand under the circumstances. And he said, Mr. Handley, are you trying to show contempt for this court? It was all I could do not to say, no, Your Honor, I'm doing my best to conceal it. But I didn't say it. I said, Your Honor, I've always understood that contempt, like beauty, might be solely in the eyes of the beholder. What is it that I'm doing that is troubling you? He said, every time I rule against you, you bow and say, thank you, Your Honor. And I think you're trying to show contempt for this court. I said, Your Honor, my mother taught me to be polite. When I take up your time with an objection and you rule, I appreciate it. And I say, thank you. And I guess the bow is just a habit. They said, well, don't do it again. I said, Your Honor, I shan't. Thank you. You did it again. I didn't bow. We got through that case, and fortunately, the result was good. But that judge, I don't think ever forgot that episode, and I know I shan't, ever. But I think that's probably the height or the depth of my experiences. There are some episodes that really stand out in your mind as you go through the practice. It's been 65 years for me, shortly. September 8, of 1951, I was admitted to practice and came here to Orlando, and I've been here ever since. But I've a grand old gentleman who was here in town when I got here, and his family sort of adopted me. He had a son who was about my age, and introduced me to my wife. And I always appreciated that. In addition, he had some land, and the land was down at the intersection of I-4 and the Turnpike. It crossed his property, and so did the Houston, Texas gas and oil pipeline. By the way, Robert Y. Patterson, their general counsel, passed away July 4, and his announcement in this morning's paper. A great friend of mine, a wonderful man, a wonderful lawyer, one of the greatest generation. And this man was a lawyer, but he was also a very dedicated Methodist. He had a big family. His brand was 6R, 6 Rady Balls. Cushman Shelton Rady Ball, the elder. He was not senior, He did have a junior. And Cush Jr. and I were very good friends. He asked me to represent him in the various condemnation cases, eminent domain, for the taking of land across his property. He had sold the property and had bought 14,000 acres down in St. Lucie County. And he needed to pay for that land, that new land. Well, the county took 100-foot right-of-way across the property, and we got a very good result. And then the pipeline went across. I-4 had gone across immediately before that, and the turnpike was extended, and it crossed. So one of the jokes that he and I had between us was the highest and best use of that property was for condemnation purposes. And we were able to pay for his new ranch by the awards from the various condemning authorities in taking property here in Orange County that he had owned for a long, long time. And by reason of those cases, he was able to purchase that larger estate. Well, bless your heart, along came Ashland Oil Company and demanded that he sell that property to them. In the meantime, the turnpike, when it was extended up to Orange County and was able, by reason of that, to assist in paying off the new property, it went right through his new property, 7.5 miles, a double curve, an S curve, right through his property, which just broke his heart. He said it made 2 ranches out of his 1 ranch. But Ashland Oil Company wanted to buy it because he had retained jurisdiction over the ditches alongside the turnpike. And they wanted to put a refinery there and run the pipe from there out into the inlet and out to sea and have an offloading dock out in the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. And they paid him a large sum of money. He came to me and said, I want you to figure out where we can put $1 million that I'm giving to God. He said, 10% of every dime that came into my hands has gone to God. I said, Mr. Cush, you mean the gross or the net? The gross. I said, think of how much money you would have if you hadn't given all that money away. He said, I'd still be working for Giles and Gurney for $50 a month. He said to me, you cannot get ahead of God. You can't get ahead of God. And he proved it. He proved it. I think that was the highest point of my career. And I thought that was a worthy end for his career. He passed away a short time later, and we had the honor of handling his estate. But that represents to me the ultimate of a lawyer's commitment. I was trying a case involving an emergency vehicle, and the judge had allowed a view of the fire engine, an enormous thing, big as a locomotive. And he told me to bring it down to the courthouse. We were in the old courthouse then, Judge Overstreet, Murray Overstreet. And so we started out for a lunch break. I was to bring the siren after lunch, and we'd go right down and see it. And he called everybody back in the courtroom. Same courtroom that's still on display, by the way. And He got everyone seated. Of course, the jury was gone. He said, Mr. Handley, do not let them fire off that siren, bringing that fire engine down here. Fine, Your Honor, I'll instruct them. We started down the stairs. All right, everybody back in the courtroom. Madam Court Reporter, back on the record. Mr. Handley, you tell them not to fire that siren off when they leave in that fire engine. Yes, Your Honor, I'll tell them. And I did. So we were in final argument. Wilson Sanders representing the plaintiff. And he made his argument, and I got up to sum up. And but around Taft, a siren fired up. And that siren came up and got closer and closer and closer and passed right by the courthouse, right under our window. I was grinning from ear to ear, didn't say anything. The jury were having a terrible time. Jurors concealing their amusement. You know, they have coughing spells and so forth. And it was absolutely incredible. You could cut the tension in the courtroom with a knife. And finally it came by and then faded up, going up to Florida Hospital probably or somewhere. And on the way back to my chair, Wilson said to me, "You blankety blank blank." And I said, "Wilson, so help me God, I'm not smart enough to think that up." It was a coincidence. The intervention of the Lord God Almighty in the affairs of men, as far as I'm concerned. The one consistency, I would say, of my experiences has been that there's no substitute for preparation. I read an article some time ago about valedictorians. And coincidentally, I was valedictorian of the Lakeland High school class of 1945. And the principal's daughter thought she was going to be. And I decided, no way, Jose. And she was not the valedictorian. But this article said the one thing that I found, this researcher, that they're not always the smartest, they're not always the quickest, but they all worked hard. They all worked hard. My dad told me when I came up here from the country to town, moved to the hard road, started taking the paper, said, "Son, those people will work you to death if you let them." Said a horse will run until his heart bursts, but a mule will sull when he gets tired, and he won't move. And you can build a fire under him, and he'll move forward just far enough to burn up the wagon. Said a mule is going to rest. He said, you take a mule's pace and survive. You got to survive. And I've taken that advice very seriously, but also the preparation. I figure I wasn't the smartest lawyer in the world. I wasn't the best looking and wasn't the best prepared personally, but I could be the best prepared in the courtroom. I could outwork them. And gifted with a strong body and a decent mind, I've been able to do that. And that's the one lesson I have learned. You may not outsmart them, and you may not be able to get the best side of the case, but you can outwork the other side. You can be prepared. You can't over-prepare. You can over-try a case, but you can't over-prepare. Lesson for the day. I've told all the young lawyers that I've ever encountered that if you're new here in town, the first thing you should do is to join every club you think you'll ever want to join as quickly as you can, because you have to break eggs to make omelets, and you're gonna have to break some eggs in your career. Trial lawyers aren't always the most popular people in town, and if you do your job, you're gonna make some people mad. For one thing, if you win, the opposing party and the opposing lawyer are not going to be happy. And some of them have long memories. I personally have always said forgive and remember. And I would suggest that you join every club you can. Now, of course, that's facetious, but my advice to them is that build a reputation for yourself. Every time you make an appearance, every time you turn in a performance, you're not only representing your client and your firm, you're representing yourself. And this thing of reputation is amorphous, and we don't know where it comes from. But it's like pornography. We know it when we see it. And you will be building your reputation from get-go, from the first start you have until you hang it up. You'll be building that reputation, that thing they call reputation. So keep that ever in mind in your personal conduct, in your community life, in your family life, in your professional life, that you are building your own reputation, representing yourself in all of those occasions. And I tell them they ought to dress like a lawyer. You ought to look like a lawyer. The old wheeze about the fella in the top hat and the white tie and tails strolling down the street. What's the matter with you? The doctor told me I'm impotent, and I'm trying to look impotent. So that you ought to look the part. You ought to act the part. And you're always on stage, always when you're out and about. There are many benefits to being a part of a BOTA. It does contribute to your standing in the community, first of all, because it's quite an honor. It is an honor to be elevated by your peers to their fraternity. Not just the fraternity of the practice of law, but the fraternity of enjoying social activities and hobnobbing with high and mighty and those that are not as yet at the very top, but are on their way, and those that have topped the rise and are coming down on the other side. And of course, when you cross over the hill and get over the hill, you're supposed to pick up speed, and I've noticed you really do. Bob Schuller famously said on TV, Reverend Bob Schuller, that life's like a roll of toilet paper. The closer you get to the end, the faster it seems to go. And I can testify to that from my own personal knowledge. But there's so many benefits to a BOTA, but I think the prevailing one, and the one that is underwriting all of its activities, is the fellowship. The fellowship of, I facetiously say again, kindred souls. But we're all in this boat together, and all of us need to have our turn at the oars and our turn resting. So we can enjoy each other in a BOTA and not be fearful that something we do or say is going to be paraded all over the community. And it, to me, represents, again, back to one of my themes, a refuge from the storms of the practice, and especially the rigors of trial practice. I've known many, 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 many good lawyers who have just worn out, where they simply could not put up with it any longer. And that's always a tragedy to see a talent that burns out. But it does occur, and when it does, everyone knows it, and especially the person who is at that moment burning out. So it's a sad thing to occur, and I think a BOTA is a help, if I say so with due modesty. I'm reminded of the great architect who was asked on the stand his profession. He said, "I'm the world's greatest living architect." A friend of his said, "That was a bit much, wasn't it?" He said, "I was under oath." So, in my judgment, a BOTA represents the finest of the fine, the quintessential trial people who represent the ultimate in the practice of law, that of being a trial lawyer. One of my friends over at the YMCA, we were running one morning, and he said, "How much do you think you have lost?" And I said, "In what sense?" And he said, "Of your capacity, your ability." And I said, "I don't know, I think I've gained, through the years." And he said, "Well, are your younger partners going to tell you when you need to shove off?" And I said, "I wouldn't put my career in their hands. They would kick me out in a moment." And he said, "Well, how long are you going to do it?" And I said, "Well, as long as I can, as long as I can make sense." And I intend to keep on practicing law as well as I can. I don't do much work anymore, but I'm available for ideas and shooting the bull and war stories, and have jokes will travel, and so I think I'll keep it up as long as I can. I lost my wife 2 years ago, which was just absolutely the worst thing that ever happened. So it's kind of lonely, but I get to have fellowship here in the firm, and at lunch, invariably with other lawyers, and evenings for doers and soda, and enjoy that very much. So thank you for the honor of this interview. It was very nice of you, very kind of you.